13 men died when this ship was smashed in the dark. And for over 100 years, nobody has had any idea where it was. This is the SS Express, a small steamship lost off the Orkneys in 1918 that has been missing ever since. Our target for the dive is a wreck lying in 85 metres. It's about the right size and is split into two, so it looks really promising. We're hoping to get the evidence that will allow us to prove beyond reasonable doubt that we have found the SS Express. To do that, we need to find 3 critical clues. The first is a distinctive 2-cylinder compound engine. We're also after hard evidence of her cargo and the catastrophic break where the hull was quite literally chopped in two. If we find them, we can say that we've solved a shipwreck mystery that's been around for over 100 years. But more importantly, we also provide closure to the local community. Because these weren't just anonymous sailors, these were members of that community. They were brothers and fathers and sons who over the passage of time have not been forgotten. Their grandfathers, great-grandfathers, great-uncles. And today, if we identify the Express, we have the opportunity to give those families the knowledge of where those people are. So, why was it so hard to find? In order to understand that, we have to go back to 1918. This was wartime, the First World War. The North Sea and the area around the Orkney was a front line. There was convoys and supply ships and naval vessels and submarines. There was no navigation lights. All there were blacked out ships and a whole lot of metal moving through the same narrow, dangerous water. The SS Express was a slow cargo steamer. The ship that hit it, HMS Grenville, was an M-class destroyer. Fast, narrow, built to cut through water at high speed. The Express was on its regular cargo route from Leith near Edinburgh in Scotland to Kirkwall when just 12 miles short of her destination she encountered the Grenville. Now in peacetime these ships would never have been this close, but in war they had to occupy that same amount of blacked out sea. And the physics mean if a 1,000-ton destroyer hits a 350-ton small steamship, that isn't just another bump. It's a knife edge acting like an axe cutting straight through the steamship. And that's exactly what happened when the Grenville hit the Express. It didn't just damage her, it chopped her in two. On board were 13 men, mostly from Orkneys, supplemented by 2 Royal Navy gunners, and they went down with her. In 1918, there was no GPS, there was no modern sonar, and no time really to figure out exactly where they were. The war moved on, and the wreck of the SS Express simply vanished into the North Sea. Now, anyone who's watched any of my videos will know that I love a good wreck dive, but more importantly, I love the opportunity to solve mysteries. And that's exactly what this video and this dive is all about. This is MV Cassina, which is a really well-known dive boat in Scapa Flow, the Orkneys, but also operates off the west coast of Scotland. This is the 2023 Lost in Waters Deep Gasparados expedition. So a chap called Kevin Heath is giving us information on dive sites. The Gasparados dive team is run by the Mortimers, so Steve and Barbara Mortimer. They put together a team which I was very grateful to be included in that, and we headed up to Scotland, and we then went and spent a week diving pretty much almost all of them unknown wrecks. So this was the first dive that we did. It was the first wreck we identified, but we then dived on other wrecks. We found HMS Host, HMS Negro, and then another wreck. Unfortunately, we're not 100%. We managed to identify that one, but 4 days in a row, Rick and myself descended onto wrecks that had never been dived before, which was an incredible privilege. And I'll put a link to those videos if you want to go and watch some of the other ones. Now, the thing that you're probably observing is the dive deck on Closina, which is absolutely massive. This is a liveaboard dive boat as well, so we actually spent the whole time living on here. The cabins are just in front of where that lady is. You can see there she's with the camera. That is the emergency access to the cabins, which are there under the deck. We had all the kit on board the boat that we needed. So there's a filling station down at the right-hand end, which does not only air and nitrox, but also oxygen and trimix as well. So it's an incredibly well fitted out boat for this kind of expedition diving. The other thing that you can probably see is that we had a great surface team as well. So the two chaps on the right hand side in the day glow vests, they were our crew for the week. So they basically managed the deck, managed the filling, operated the boat. What we also had is the lady with the camera. She was there to document what was going on, but we also had several members of the team. So unfortunately, Fran had been bent the day before, so her diving was finished. You can see there she's just helping me getting ready with my scooter. The crew were getting Rick sorted, who's to my right, with his scooter. And we also had Will, who unfortunately had been bent a month or two before, so he was acting as kind of like a support diver. But here we go. This is the moment of truth. You can see there we've had the message. We are in the water. You can see just to the side there what a massive vessel Closina is. It's a brilliant diving platform. You can also see conditions are looking pretty good as well. So there's not too much of a swell when you consider that we're kind of 15, 18 miles offshore. That's absolutely lovely. The boat have already got the shot in. And so therefore, Rick and me, we're getting ourselves there, and this is where the scooters really help. You can see there, I'm just turning on the GoPro on the top of the scooter. I'm probably going to unfold the arms. There we go. I'm going to unfold the arms in a second as well to get the video lights going. And for anybody or for people who've never done this before, this is a really, really exciting moment of the dive. So you've spent all this time getting to the dive site, not just driving out in the boat, but also, for me, I've come from Plymouth, so I've driven the length of, in fact, most of us have, I've driven the length of the United Kingdom to get up to Scotland. Then there's all the planning, all the talking about the dive. And so when you actually get in the water and you start going down the shot line, it's an absolutely incredibly exciting interesting moment of the dive. So you've got no idea what you're going to get at the bottom. We think we know. Obviously, we've talked about it. We know it's not a particularly big wreck. We know it's probably got the stern chopped off, and we know that it's got that engine, the boiler, and we're kind of hoping there might be some cargo down there as well. So really exciting. Now you can see we haven't messed around. Got the scooter is on the go and accelerating down to the bottom. For those of you who haven't seen any of my other videos, this is a really common thing that Rick and me got into the habit of doing. The other thing you might have noticed is the watercolour changing. So it started off with quite gloopy green, but as we get below that layer, you can start to see now it's becoming really blue. And that's a good sign because it means the visibility is likely to be quite good at the bottom. Of course, it will be dark, and what I'm doing now is I'm actually stopping to put my video lights on. So, it makes sense to do them before you need them. Also makes sense to do it when you're relatively shallow, so you're not incurring a decompression penalty for turning on your video lights. And you can see there they are. They're all sorted, although maybe not quite positioned as I would like them. Up ahead of me, you can see Rick. You probably see that his strobe is flashing. Now, I think what it was, there was something with his strobe, so he couldn't turn it on once he got below a certain depth. So he also got into the habit of turning it on the way down, so that by the time he got to his depth, it was all sorted. He could put it on the shot line, and everything would be absolutely fine. Hopefully, you can see what I've talked about now, which is that the The viz is quite good. You can see Rick's there ahead of me. It wasn't quite as good as we had on some of the other dives, but this is still very respectable. The other thing I guess to mention is you can probably see I've got the sheer water overlay on this video. On the left hand side there you can see the depth, you can see the time, you can see the set point, so the partial pressure of oxygen I'm breathing. You can also see that I'm using 1265 as my diluent. Now that works well for diluent flushes, it works well for narcotic depth. You'd probably like a bit more helium just to bring the gas density down, but as you can see we're using scooters, so there's other kind of risk mitigating factors there. So 1265, it's kind of my go-to gas for this kind of depth. Now we're getting close to the bottom, as you can see here. I've caught up with Rick, and then you can probably just see the wreck is starting to kind of come into view, which is a fantastic moment on any dive. The worst thing you want to do is get to the bottom and find there is no wreck there, and that happened on one of the other dives on this trip, and you can I'll stick a link to it, so if you want to go and see what happens when you get to 90 meters and there's nothing there, that's where it is. But of course the first thing to do at the bottom of any dive is the bottom of dive admin. So you need to put your strobe on the shot line. You need to check that the cells are reading slightly above the set point so that you know that they are not current limited. The other thing you need to do is tie in the shot to the wreck, and that's what Rick is doing in front of me. So he's got a thin piece of string, he's tying it in, and that will just make sure the shot doesn't get dragged off. There's no current on this dive, you can see that, so it's really unlikely to happen, but it's just one of those things we do on every dive. While he's doing that, you can see I've just attached my strobes, and I'm just going to go over and just make sure that Rick is okay, doesn't need a hand. Of course, really unlikely that he would, but just we work together, we stick together. In terms of where the shot is, you can see it's off the side of the wreck, so it's actually on the seabed. There's a bit of wreckage down there on the floor. There's also the whirl supply of little fish as well, which I guess is kind of nice. Having said that Rick doesn't need a hand, you can see that the waster is still in his hand, so it's clear that he hasn't been able to do it. Almost certainly it's because he hasn't found anything down there to tie it into. So you can see what we're doing now is we are just moving the shot so that it is closer to the wreck, and you can see there's plenty of bits of wreckage that he can tie it on once we get to the wreck. So I guess it's a good job that I did go over and check that he was okay and that he didn't need a hand, because in this particular case he did. And almost every job underwater is easier if divers work together. So there I am. You can see we've gone over to the wreck, and Rick is going to tie it in with that thin piece of string. Now, sometimes people go, "Isn't it awful that you're leaving all that plastic down there with that bit of plastic rope?" And you know what? I guess I might understand why that's the case. Apart from the sea is absolutely full of plastic. All of these wrecks are covered in bits of rubbish, bits of nets, all sorts of things. So frankly, I don't believe that one little piece of string is going to make any difference whatsoever. But it's also an important part of our it's part of our system, it's part of our safety system. We need it to make sure the other divers can get onto the wreck okay. You can also see there's a massive piece of trawl net there hanging off the side of the wreck, and one of the things with this wreck, like pretty much all wrecks, is that it is covered in all sorts of lost fishing gear and all that kind of stuff. You just learn to live with it and avoid it. Now the other thing, for any of you who've watched my video about identifying shipwrecks and what you do, then the very first thing you want to do on a shipwreck is understand the orientation. So which way is the bow, which way is the stern, and that allows you pretty much always to get your head around the wreck. Now, I haven't quite done it at this moment in the video, but to save you all a bit of stress, what I've done is I've actually come up through the break at the rear of the wreck. So what I've got my torch on at the moment, that is the starboard side of the wreck. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start moving forward along the starboard side. So that orientates you. To the left is the kind of main bit of the wreck, although I'm kind of just turned around a bit to look at it there. And we're going to see the engine in a little bit. And then later on in the video, when I come back here, you're going to see the brake really clearly, and you're going to see the prop shaft. So it's actually a really good bit of evidence that supports the story that this is the Express, because we're going to see where it's chopped. You probably just see down to the left-hand side there, that's a kind of a hatch. So that would have been into the rear cargo hold. Off to my left-hand side here, that is the engine. And you probably just heard me saying 2 cylinders there. So, once again, another great piece of evidence, and something that we've established really early on in the dive. Most compound engines have the low pressure cylinder, the big one towards the stern, and the high pressure cylinder towards the bow, which is exactly the layout we've got here. In front of that is the boiler. That circle down there, that is the base of the funnel. So this is a really small ship. All these things are really close together. You can also probably see there's a load of portholes down on the right hand side, because of course, although we can see the engine and we can see the boiler now, they would have been all covered over by the superstructure. So this area here is in the middle of the ship. This is where a lot of the crew quarters would have been. This area that I'm at now, this is where the bridge area would be. It would have been above the boiler, forward of the funnel, because obviously he didn't want the smoke blowing into the bridge. This was coal powered. It was coal powered steamship, so of course it would have been quite dirty, produced a lot of smoke. In front of me there, you can see another hatch. So that would have been the opening into the forward hold. Once again, you can see there's portholes and stuff down here. So this is where all the superstructure has collapsed down. As we're going to see later on, some of it's collapsed outwards as well. You probably heard me talking there. I said that's a lamp. So that is some sort of paraffin lamp, so it would have been used. That one looks as though it was on the starboard side, so it might have been a starboard marker. Because it was wartime, that wouldn't have been lit. In front of me there, that is the winch, so that would have been the cargo winch used for lifting stuff in and out of that forward cargo hold, because of course these days all that stuff is on the shore. Ships don't by and large have winches for getting stuff in and out of cargo holds. Back in this day though, they had to do it all themselves. Up there just to the left hand side where I'm just shining my torch, that's the capstan. So that would have been used for lifting the anchor up and down. You can see there's some mooring bollards up here. So this is the bow of the SS Express, and I think we can call it the SS Express now. We have seen the cut at the back, although later on we're going to see it really closely. We've also seen that compound engine. We know that the wreck is in the right place because this is where we're diving. We know that it's got the single boiler, so it's we know the right length, of course, as well. So and also we know that it's in 2 bits as well. So this is all really, really strong corroborating evidence that this is the Express. And now that we're diving on it as well, we can see it's the right era. It's a steamship, all those kind of things. So if you have enough corroborating evidence, you can eventually say with a really high degree of probability that we are on the wreck that we think it is. So this is the bow area again. You can see that what I'm doing is looking onto the seabed, and the reason is because I know any number of people who found bells just off the side of wrecks. So I always like to have a good look and just to kind of make sure. You can see the bow is slightly over to the starboard side, slightly resting on the on its right side. You can see there's a load of hull, and as I go down it, I'm going to be going back towards the engine area, back towards a bridge. I'm going to be having a good peer through and to see what I can see. Slight spoiler: we don't find any really good brass stuff on this, so there's no bridge gear or none that we found. There could be loads of reasons for that. One is it might have been iron, so it might have been cheap and therefore just rotted away. It could have been trawled, so the bridges on these things were relatively flimsy, often wooden, and therefore, if a net snagged it, it could easily be pulled off. So it could be somewhere off to the side of the wreck. So a couple of different things could have happened to it. But the number of divers, the size of this wreck, if there was a major thing like a telegraph or a helm or a compass bowl, then I'm pretty confident that we would have found it. And there was nothing like that seen on the wreck. I didn't see it. Nobody else saw it. So I think we can say with a pretty high degree of certainty that the bridge gear isn't on here. We also, loads of people had a good look around in the engine area as well, and there was no sign of a builder's plate or a maker's plate either. So, who knows where that is, possibly buried. Now, to give you an indication of how small this wreck is, I'm already back at the stern and I'm coming back in through the break. And in a moment, what we're going to see is the hatch for the rear cargo hold. You'll see the kind of coaming and stuff around it. What we can also see, I think, there on the inside is quite a bit of coal. So this would have probably been the coal bunker has kind of spilled out a bit towards the stern. There you go. There's the hatch cover that I talked to you about. And if you remember, quite at the beginning of the dive, I found a bottle and I put the bottle on the side. That bottle is off to kind of the right of where I am now. But there's also a few other bits and pieces in here. You can probably see my hand going out, and I think I'm going to get another bottle from in there. I don't bring it into the camera, so you're not going to see it. I don't know why that is. Maybe I couldn't actually get it. Maybe I got distracted by something else. It's something sometimes a bit difficult when you're going back over these videos. This was quite a while ago now. I've done a lot of diving since then, and you can't always remember the particular details of what's happening on a dive. So this in front of me there is the engine, but what I've seen down here, you can see beneath that net is a porthole. It's one of those things. When I first started doing this kind of diving, I would see a porthole and I'd get super, super excited because they're kind of one of those, I think, iconic things. All divers, like portholes, that they use as, you see them in pubs, and divers like to have them in the houses and all that kind of stuff. So even though I've seen, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of portholes now, I guess, on wrecks, there's still always something about them that attracts me to them. So you can see that one there. I tried to pull out, and when we come back round in a minute, you'll see that I did get it out a bit more, and so you'll see a bit of a look at it. Now, at the time, I had no idea what this is. I've gone back and I've looked at my video footage again, and I still really have no idea what it is. So if anybody out there knows what that is, I'd be interested to kind of get your thoughts. I guess can't see it particularly well. It doesn't come out, and part of the problem with the way that I record dives is because I'm trying to do a whole load of stuff at once. It often means I don't get the best quality video footage. So you can see that my main torch in my left hand is just super bright. So whenever I look at something and I put it on it, it kind of burns it out, which is one of those things that I'm aware of, and I know it's something I need to do better. Now there you go. There's a big old lobster. Probably a bit surprised to see its home being invaded by these strange beasts, but anyway, it's still down there. It presumably is enjoying the rest of its life. You saw that porthole a moment ago, the one that I was trying to pull out earlier, and I'm now back on really the starboard side of the ship. I'm just kind of taking my time, having a good look around in this area, just to, I guess, the right-hand side of the engine. You can see the hull on the right-hand side. Now, one of the interesting things we'll see in a bit is the superstructure from this part has actually collapsed outwards. So when I go on the seabed off this side in a bit, you'll see that superstructure there. It's got some more portholes in it and everything. But we're still to the rear of the engine. So that's the hatch that goes into the rear cargo hold, and you can see I'm just having a good look around here in the cargo hold to see what I can find. And bingo, you can see I've just spotted something there. It's a bottle. In fact, quite probably difficult to see, but there's a few bottles, so there's at least 2 there in the torch beam. So I'm going to go down and have a pick them up. Some people get really excited by bottles, absolutely love them. I'm told if you know what you're looking at, you can tell when they're made and all those kind of things. The thing that I can tell about this one is that it's actually got a cork in it, and the cork still seems to be okay. So that's interesting. Potentially, therefore, whatever is inside there is still drinkable. You can see I'm just having a fiddle around with the cork, see what it's like. That's quite exciting, because what would you be carrying on a ship going from Edinburgh to Orkney? Who knows? Potentially that could be beer, I guess, looking at the bottle. Maybe wine. I don't know what else you would carry in a bottle. I've kind of chucked it down, and then I think I'm having a bit of regret. I'm going to get it back, and the reason is because I can feel on it that there are raised bits. So there is something on that bottle in terms of some letters or something, and I'm going to be a bit naughty here. Well, kind of naughty, maybe not naughty. The policy on this whole trip was no take, so we weren't going to bring anything up. Not that it would have been illegal to do so, but because that is the skipper's policy on the boat. He doesn't want artifacts coming up, which is absolutely fine. So you'll see later on this video, I do put some bottles in a bag, and I do start to bring them up. They don't stay on the surface. They actually end up back on the wreck. So, but what it does do is give me the opportunity to have a look at them, and I can. So that's the reason I know that this bottle has got McEwan's written on it. Unfortunately, I don't have any imagery or video of that, so you're going to have to take my word for it. McEwan's is still a beer that is drunk in the 21st century, but at this particular period of time, in 1918, it was brewed in Edinburgh, which is very close to Leith, where this vessel departed from. So once again, that's not a complete smoking gun, but it's a really good, I think, indication, or it's a good connection, another piece of evidence that suggests this wreck is the SS Express. I'll be honest, I don't think we need it. We've got plenty of other pieces, but it is, it's another thing, helps build up the picture. Now, there's something going on here. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but in a moment you're going to see my string bag on the floor on the right-hand side. So I suspect what I'm trying to do is get it out of my pocket, and then I drop it. My there it is. You can see it falling down to the bottom there. My string bag has got a clip on it, a brass clip on it, that makes it negatively buoyant. So I think, as I say, I think I tried to get it out of my pocket. For whatever reason, I let go of it, and it's dropped down to the seabed here. This is off the side of the wreck, the starboard side. So you can see I've got those 2 bottles in my hand. Going to get my string bag, and I'm going to put them in there. And then later on, I'm going to find another couple of bottles as well. As I say, I bring them up to far enough so I can have a look at them, and then I drop them back on the wreck. So if anybody wants these bottles, that's where they are. If I'm brutally honest, I'm a bit gutted about that, because I would have liked to have kept them. Obviously, I'd have declared them and all those kind of things. But hey, that's the skipper's policy. It's not one I agree with, but it is his policy, and I think as courtesy as it's the right thing to do. We'd had this discussion before we did any of these dives, and he said that's a policy, and we're all like, yeah, fine, okay, we're all going to stick with that. So it is what it is. And frankly, on this trip, this isn't the worst thing that I was disappointed to leave down there. If you've not seen my video about diving the HMS Negro, we found the bell on the HMS Negro, and it's a beautiful size. It would have been trivially easy to bring it up to the surface. Personally, I would have liked to have seen it in a museum or whatever, but hey, it's still down there. Now, what has happened here is you can see that I've managed to get that bit of the sort of draw cord for my bag with that brass clip that I mentioned earlier on somehow wrapped in my scooter. And this shows, I think, one of the challenges when you're trying to do lots of things at once. So if you think about what I'm doing on this dive, I am trying to take videos, I am trying to operate a scooter, I am trying to put things in a bag, and also I'm trying to remember the dive and have a good dive, and keep an eye on my buddy and all those kind of things, and those things are not always mutually compatible, which is how come stuff happens like has happened there. Where I am now is you can just see the boiler is off to my right hand side. I'm on the starboard hull, so the seabed is off to my left hand side. I'm going back towards the stern now. You can see there's a couple of portholes there. We've seen those earlier on in the video when I moved forward. What I'm going to do now is just drop onto the seabed. And I think when I went to pick up that bag, I spotted some other bottles down there. Now somebody's flashing wildly over there. I don't know why. They've obviously spotted something. I've been there already, so I'm going to leave them to it. We've got all the other divers on the wreck now. It is a small wreck, and therefore, there's not much room. You can see I've got some in my torch beam there. You can see there's some more bottles. So for me, we're starting to see evidence of the cargo. So if we look back to the 3 things we said we wanted to see on the dive. Oh, the other thing I've just seen, you probably saw there was an open porthole there. And if you think about portholes open into ships, this is on the outside of a ship. So this is the bit that off to my right is the bit that I mentioned earlier, a bit of the superstructure that's fallen outwards. You can also see with it various bottles and other bits and pieces. That one there, I think, was made of clay. There was a few other glass ones around on the seabed. There you go. There, in fact, there's a lovely one that had Schweppes written on it. Also had some form of logo. I've tried to find out whether there was a Schweppes bottling plant in Edinburgh or something like that, but I haven't had any joy. So that doesn't provide any great connection. What it was, though, was a really lovely bottle, and even though I'm not especially keen on them, it would have been nice. But anyway, there we go. And this, I think, shows really well that bit off to the left that I was just looking at there. That shows how that bit of the ship has folded outwards. For anyone who's keeping an eye on my dive computer, you can see that my runtime is about 24 minutes. And my TTS is up about 92. TTS, for those who don't know, time to surface. That means I've got 92 minutes of, effectively decompression, although it does also include the time to go up. Our run times on this expedition were about 2.5 to 3 hours. So I do have longer if I want to. You can see once again really clearly that bit of the wreck that's folded out. There's another porthole just in the right of the screen now, and there's the other one that is on the left. So I think those ribs that you can see there, those are on the inside of the wreck. So shows really clearly how that bit has broken outwards and then fallen over the side. Now, I think that makes me suspect that maybe the bridge might be out here. So what I'm doing is I'm just having a look around and see if there's anything that looks like it might be the bridge. I think the bridge would have sat on top of that or maybe slightly forward of it. So, it is potentially here, there's a telegraph or something like that. But as you can see, nothing is showing, which is a bit disappointing. But hey, that's the way it goes. Sometimes you get really good results. Other times there's just a whole load of seabed, which is what we've got here. So you can see I'm heading generally towards the stern of the vessel. So the hull is off to my right hand side. This is the starboard side, as I think I've mentioned. A few more bottles and stuff there. So there's a ton of stuff down here. You can see there's loads and loads of stuff there. So whether they were cargo or potentially, I guess they might have been part of the galley or something. There's cat shark down there on the left hand side, and yeah, so this is going towards the stern, and one of the things I'm going to do is make a really interesting discovery. So the first thing is there's a really clear break, and you can see it there just at the sort of top of the screen, not particularly well, but there's a really clean break on this wreck. And the other thing is what I'm just shining my torch on there, that is the prop shaft. So that is obviously the bit that connects the engine to the screw, and the fact that it is lying there completely exposed on the seabed with no sign of any of the stern. And when I turn around, you'll see that there's a really clean break. I think this once again really supports this theory that this is the Express. And that it was cut in two by the Grenville. It's really obvious. You just don't get wrecks like this unless there's been some catastrophic event. You can imagine the Grenville going through the hull of the Express, severing almost all of it, apart from perhaps some of the bit that was under the water. The drive shaft is obviously a really solid part of the ship. That bit maybe survived and then broke away during the sinking. And that's why we can see what we've got here, which is the drive shaft of the Seabed, the really clear break, no sign of the screw, no sign of the stern. So once again, this is more evidence, more corroborating evidence with the fact that this wreck is what we think it is. So I'm now heading back up onto the main bit of wreckage. You can see there's another diver with me there. I'm not 100% certain who it is, but this is now coming on, and you can see the kind of the tears, I think, in the wreck there. And once again, this shows how narrow the wreck is as well. So that's the full width basically in front of me there. You can see the left and the right of it. So it is a small wreck. And then as I come up, there's another sign of kind of humanity there. So on the left hand side there, that is a toilet. You can also see there's something there that I've just got my torch on, which looks like a plate of some sort. It looks like that looks non-ferrous. I don't know why I don't take that out, but I don't. I think maybe it's because I'm quite close to the end of my dive. Maybe it's because I've got that bag full of stuff and I don't want to get it snagged on anything. Who knows? But I'm coming up onto the wreck. There's another diver there. I think that's Steve, obviously the leader of the Gasparados, whose project this is. He's obviously found something down in there. That's that hatch combing that we've seen a few times before, or that hatch that we've seen a few times before. The engine is, as I'm looking at it now, slightly to my left. The beer bottles came from, I guess, just behind me. It's a really tiny wreck. There's another diver there that I think is Paul. I don't know what he's having a look at down there, but clearly, there's something of interest. Can't be that interesting because he's left it alone. So this is also towards the end of my dive. You can see there my TTS is up, getting close to 2 hours. There's a nice little edible crab there. The shot line is just over the other side of the wreck. So this is really close to where I started the dive, which is exactly where you want to be at the end of the dive. I think I'm going to go over there and just have a quick look and see if Paul did spot anything particularly good. There isn't anything there, so that's going to be left alone. I'm really starting to think now that I need to be getting up, but it's always difficult this stage of a dive because it's been a great dive. It's been absolutely fascinating. I've seen all those different things. You always want to stay down a little bit longer. What I do have on my computer that you can't see here is a Delta 5, which is how much more deco you're going to need to do if you stay down here for another 5 minutes. And you look at that and it starts to show some scarily big numbers at this point. So there's always that thing in the back of your mind, which is the longer I'm down here, the more I'm going to pay, the more deco I'm going to have to do. You probably saw the base of the funnel, which is off to my right hand side. You might say, well, where's the funnel then? Well, funnels are, they're made of really thin metal. They don't need to carry any weight, so they often either rot away or get pulled away because they stand well above the wreck as well. So if the bridge is gone, chances are the funnel will have gone with it as well, either by that process of being pulled off or they just corrode away. This thing's been down there for 100 years. All that salt water is never going to be good. This is the port side of the wreck, another porthole there, various other bits and pieces, all sorts of things. And there you can see, I think that is Rick, and that's me saying, right, I've got 127 minutes of TTS. Even when I accelerate it with my by changing the PO2 to 1.5, that's still going to be quite a lot of deco. So it's time for us to go up, and you can see my strobe's just off to the left hand side there, just having one quick look, I think, on the seabed, although, you know, I have been past this spot, so if there was anything there, you'd imagine that I'd have seen it. Rick, I'm not 100% certain why he's going to the bottom of the shot. Maybe he left something down there, I don't know. You can see how crowded this wreck is now. There's a couple of other divers there. You can see a few more strobes. There's my double strobe. You can always tell mine. I put the green tape on them. There you go. There's Rick. He's at the bottom there. I don't know. I should probably find out what he was doing down there, but I said let's go, and he headed down to the bottom of the seabed. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking my strobes off, but I'm also just waiting for him as well, just to make sure that he's okay. And as you're going to see in a minute, he does. There you go. He's coming back up again. So whatever he was doing, all is well. I'm struggling a bit to get my strobes off, but once again, that's kind of probably because I've got that bag in my left hand and the torch in my left hand. They do kind of take up a bit of finger capacity. But there you go, strobed it off. And what I always do is I've got a clip on my shoulder that those get clipped onto, along with my tag when I get there, when I get to the lazy. So there you go, I've got the bag, and what I'm going to do now is what I normally do, which is I scooter upwards, just waiting for Rick to get his strobe off. You've probably seen, had a quick look down on the wreck. You can see there's some other divers there. That diver on the right hand side is probably close to the bow. There's another diver just above me. I think that's Steve getting his shot line off, or getting his strobe off rather. So this is kind of the end of the dive. If you watch my other videos, you'll have seen sort of similar things to this happen a lot of times. As I'm coming up now, I'm turning stuff off. You can see I'm turning off the video lights. I'm just keeping an eye on Rick, who's down below me. There's Steve, who I mentioned earlier. And I think one of the nice things is, now that I've got my video lights off, it gives you an idea. There's actually quite a lot of ambient light down here, and also the visibility is pretty good. So those are all really nice things. Now, when you're diving at this depth, once you're done, you don't want to be hanging around at the depth. So you can see there, Rick, he's scootering up towards his first deco stop, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing as well, which is we're getting up as quick as we can. Not quite as quick as we can. We're getting up quickly while still, relatively safely. So we will get ascent alarms on this, but it's kind of our policy is to get off the bottom, kind of half the distance to your first deco stop, and then bring everything back under control. So that's what we've done. You can see me about 50 meters there. First deco stop is 39, and we're kind of making some nice steady progress up towards it. Still got the bottles. I'm going to have a look at them when I actually get a reasonable amount of deco, although unfortunately I don't have that on video. You can see as we ascend there, Rick is all the gas is being vented from his loop. For those who don't dive rebreathers, on the way down, you have to put gas in the loop to keep the volume so that you've got enough to breathe in. But then when you come up, that gas expands and you've got to vent it. That should be the only time that gas comes in and out of a rebreather loop, apart from the small amount of oxygen that you consume in order to stay alive. And I think this is one of the nice things there. You can see me looking down, just having a quick look at my bottles, but if you can see me looking down there, you can see Steve well below us there. And I think that shows, for me anyway, how quickly we've got up to our, to nearly our first deco stops. And as I say, that is going to help reduce deco. The other thing that helps reduce deco, as many people will have seen me do many times, is that I put my PO2, put my set point up to 1.5, and you've just seen me do that on my rebreather handset on the left hand side, and I'm going to do it on my shear water now. And when I do that, you'll see it happen on the overlay. And once again, you can literally watch the TTS drop now. So here we go. There we go. This is me starting to change it. I'm going through the menu into the dive setup menu, and once there you go, you can see I can edit the high set point. and changed the set point to 1.5, which now reflects what I've got set on the handset of my rebreather. And when I do that, you're going to see the TTS drops. It's already gone from 128 to 121, and it's just dropped down to 113 there. So that's saved me about 15 minutes of deco. Not a vast amount, but it is quite nice to have it. The other thing that's happening is I've got to the lazy shot. I'm not the last diver up. You can see there's quite a few tags on the shot light, on the lazy shot there. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to take mine off. The last diver, when they remove their tag, will release the lazy shot, and we will all then drift in the current together, so that we're not hanging on, and also the boat knows where we are. It's a process that works very well. If you've not seen my video on it, I do have a separate video, and I'll put a link into that, and you're welcome to, well, if you want to know more about the lazy shot and why it's such a good system, works so well for us, you can see it on that video. You can also see there I finally got around to turning off my strobes, and from now on in it's just going to be a case of doing the deco, doing that 112 minutes of deco. Further up, I have got my Kindle, which I'm going to read on this dive, and I can't remember what book I was, but it certainly helps pass the time. So I've jumped forward again. You can see now I'm up at about 27 meters, and the reason I'm showing this bit of video is because I quite like this phase of the dive. So what's happened, you can see there's Rick in front of me, and you probably also saw just a moment ago below me there are a load of other divers. I really like this phase of the dive when you can see the whole team is kind of slowly coming back up again. You can see everybody's there doing the deco. The lazy shot is vertical, so one of those divers has released it. We're now in the current. I'm not on the lazy, I'm not holding on to it. I'm just kind of neutrally buoyant off to the side, chilling out, watching the other divers, and you can see there they're all venting their loops as they come up, and I talked about that earlier on. The other thing you might see on my wrist there, which is probably worth mentioning, you see I've got my computer, but then below it I've got that little that black thing, and that was the controller for my heating system. At this point in time I was using something called a thermolution vest. The thermolution sat underneath my dry suit, and the batteries were underneath my dry suit, so the batteries were integral to were underneath. Now some people don't like that. They say it's a bad idea. You should have the batteries outside your dry suit, because batteries can go on fire. Sometimes they don't behave very well if they get wet. The thermolution system didn't do that, and I think the reason it didn't do that is these systems were designed for use by surfers and people who got wet all the time, so they were actually designed for that purpose. What they were also was a really good heating system. I actually really liked it. Unfortunately, the batteries had a weakness, which was the cable going into the top of them became disconnected from the batteries. So and then Thermolution as a company went bust. So what happened to that system is eventually one of the batteries died. You couldn't get a replacement, so my Thermolution has gone and is no longer it's not something I use. I've replaced it with a similar system by a company called Heat Venture. I don't know if they're related to Thermolution at all, but they make a similar sort of system. So the batteries are designed for use by snorkelers and surfers and people who actually spend time in the water. So I've never heard of anybody having an issue. I like it a lot. And if you're diving, you can see here the water's 12 degrees C. I've been in the water for nearly an hour. I've got just under 2 hours to do, and I'm a big wuss, so I do like my heating systems, and at some point very soon I'm probably going to turn it on, and that will be really nice. So for those of you who like a bit of a closer look at my deco profile, here's the download from Shearwater. You can see there fairly steady descent onto the seabed there. I mean, you see all the stuff that you've seen so far. You can see, there we go, starting to leave the bottom, coming up, and then somewhere up, quite a decent ascent rate. Somewhere up here, you're going to see, you've probably just seen, in fact, the switch from 1.3 to 1.5 PO2 and the benefit that gives you there. That's about there. Not sure what's going on with my buoyancy somewhere in the middle there, but it's not so great. And then eventually I get up onto the trapeze and stuff, do all my deco pretty much at 6 meters. I think I was reading a book at that point, and then the last little bit come up and all good. No couple of minutes extra for the wife and kids this time. Not entirely sure why that might be, but anyway, it's what happened. And you can see now, just getting to the end of the dive, loads of other divers on the shot line, come up to the surface. And one of the lovely things about the lazy shot system and, you know, diving with a boat like Lucina is when you look around, there you go, you can see it there on the surface waiting for you. And, you know, there's going to be all sorts of good things on board in terms of people to help you get kitted. And then, of course, you know, all the other facilities like lunch and, you know, dinner or whatever time it is. And then, you know, your nice bed at the end of the day after you've reviewed all the excitement. And one of the great things about this dive is there was plenty of excitement as well. It made quite a big impact locally. You know, as I said at the beginning, these were not just anonymous sailors. These were people with real connections to the local area. And those people, you know, their relatives, they were really pleased to know that the ship had been found and that, you know, the mystery had been solved. So being involved in that was just absolutely awesome. It was a fantastic result and the beginning of several days of absolutely epic diving, and a trip that I will never forget. I was so pleased to be involved with it. If you'd like to see some of the other dives that took place on that trip, they're in the middle of the screen now. There's an entire playlist of them. I hope you'll enjoy watching some of those as well. And I hope you've enjoyed watching this one. I hope you've enjoyed seeing the process in action. But for now, if you'd like to drop us a comment, leave us a like, obviously subscribe if you haven't done so. I'm Dom Robinson, Deep Wreck Diver, and I very much hope to see you on the next one of my videos.